Renewables are becoming more and more of a talked about subject in terms of investment opportunities, but is it a good time to get in just now? What's 2021 looking like for the renewables market? Alex Ocanedo joins us now. He's Chief Executive of Gore Street Capital and Investment Advisor, the Gore Street Energy Storage Fund. Alex, good to talk to you, and thanks indeed for joining us. Before we get into your fund, which I want to talk about in just a minute, I want to ask you the very straightforward question. What do you regard as renewables?
I regard renewables as a form of generation which doesn't destroy the environment. We have spent so much time over the last 50 years generating energy from types of technology which destroy the environment in tandem with supplying that energy we need for our society. And as a society, we need to move to renewable generation.
Okay, that is logical given the backdrop. We've got a lot of governments talking about this. We know here in the UK that we're going for very ambitious targets. We've got a lot of other countries trying to get headlines and trying to find ways of trying to beat the UK to get to their targets. But how are we going to do it, given that we are still very much attached to the oil markets? I mean, look at the way in which we drive our cars. And indeed, many countries around the world are still looking at investments in coal-fired power stations, for example. How do we incentivize people to move into this area? Because at the moment, my understanding is it's not massively profitable.
So renewables, I don't believe we need the incentive anymore. The UK is a market leader globally in offshore wind. It has developed more offshore wind per capita than any other country in the world and has done so at a lowest price. Offshore wind is now competitive with gas, with nuclear, with coal. And therefore, it makes complete sense not only to invest in renewables and invest in offshore wind and the necessary technologies around it from an environmental perspective, but also from a cost one.
What about some of the peripheral areas of this sort of thing we're talking about here? Some people that build houses look at ways in which they can get geothermal heat out. Is that something we should be looking at? Biomass, is that something we should be looking at, apart from the ones you just mentioned, the wind and solar, which so many investment funds are now focused in on?
So what we need to address our need for energy in society, but also the environmental pressures that our society is under, is a range of different technologies dependent on its use and its location. Geothermal is an excellent electricity source if you have large amounts of hot rocks underneath the ground, right? So if you're in Ethiopia, geothermal makes a huge amount of sense. Biomass makes a lot of sense if you have a local waste stream which can be used to generate electricity. What we need to do is approach the energy needs of our society in a holistic way and look at what technologies for what application where.
Just very quickly touching once again on some of the incentives. You say you think we don't need incentives to do this, but nonetheless there are still incentives out there. I know that some solar farms in this country still have government incentives to operate. How can we possibly persuade people it's the right thing to do without those incentives?
So what we had the government putting in place a set of incentives to speed up the adoption of renewable energy technology. That needed incentives at that time at that point in the cost curve of those renewables. As the price of renewables continues to come down and down, the electricity it's generating is cost competitive with the cost of electricity in the market, and therefore you don't need incentives. Some still do, such as some solar plants still need incentives. Offshore wind does not need incentives. Onshore wind does not need incentives. And so the government's done a good job of doing incentives at the right time and then fading away and letting the market take care of it.
How difficult do you find it sometimes to counter some of those that don't believe it works? I mean, there are certainly some cases when, let's take wind, for example, the wind doesn't blow all the time. And of course, we know that in some areas, this is a blight on the landscape. And a lot of people saying, well, you know what, it's fine, but just don't build it in my backyard. I mean, there's a lot of headwinds, aren't there, if you forgive the pun, to renewables.
There's two things in your question there. The first is offshore wind and solar and onshore wind, which is intermittent, which produces electricity when the sun shines or the wind blows, does need to be matched up with other things such as storage, such as the fund that we run here in Gore Street. We run a fund investing in storage facilities to smooth out the electricity across the grid. And so you do need to match up other technologies, such as the ones that we invest in. The second thing, in terms of onshore wind being a blight on the landscape, a much bigger blight on the landscape will be drought and grass all brown and no water because of the climate problems that we're engaged in. So it's all very well to say we can't have that, but the other outcome of not having that is really significant environmental degradation.
Yeah, good point to be made. Let's talk a little bit more about your fund, because you mentioned this energy storage thing, and I think it is important, obviously, to accept the fact, as you said quite neatly, that we don't get this power all the time, but it is possible, obviously, to harness the power in times of excessive wind and sun. Just how successful are we, first of all, in terms of battery technology, in making sure that we can suck in the power when it's made excessively, in other words, beyond what we need, and then drip it out into the network as it's needed? How good are we at doing that? Is the technology there yet that we can successfully turn this resource around to get it fed back into the system 24 hours a day?
So the technology is well grounded. And in fact, the technology we are using, for instance, in Gore Street's portfolio, lithium-ion batteries are, very well understood. We've been using them successfully for 40 years in many different types of applications, including your cell phone. So it is a well understood technology. How that then fits into, for instance, how well the UK has done. Gore Street, we run a portfolio of near 400 megawatts between the UK and Ireland, providing a critical service to the electricity grid to secure and deliver safe, secure, and cheap, cost-effective electricity. And the UK has positioned itself very successfully over the last 5 years as the market leader in using storage technologies for that purpose. So I think as we sit here in the UK, it has been a very successful role model for the global market in how to put in place the right circumstances that allow storage as an asset class to function.
I think I'm right in saying actually last year we saw a record number of days where we saw renewables feed, or was it wind, feed into the network at a greater rate than we saw other sources of power. So clearly we're moving in the right direction. Is that the case at the moment in other countries? You talk about the UK being so much further ahead. Is the UK really truly that much further ahead? And if so, should we look then for investments outside of the UK when looking at the opportunities in renewables?
For sure. So I think the UK is a market leader in offshore wind, and the firms in the UK that are involved in offshore wind are taking that expertise and bringing it into the global market. Gore Street, we're a UK-based private equity manager, a significant portfolio in the UK and Ireland, and we will, during 2021, start to do our first acquisitions outside the UK and Ireland, using the skill set that we built up in the UK and the Irish market over the last 5 years.
How do you make money? Explain a bit more about the fund and what you do to generate the return.
So as we've touched on, solar and wind are excellent generation sources and ones that we need to solve, the problems we have through climate change, but they are intermittent. They do produce electricity when the grid might not be expecting it, or they might produce electricity a little less than the grid is expecting. And so the grid, to keep the grid running, to keep electricity flowing through to consumers, needs to balance off that intermittent power source. So our assets provide a service, a balancing service to the grid operators, the national grid in Great Britain, or Air Grid on the island of Ireland, to basically keep this grid in balance, so there's never an imbalance in the grid, and allowing electricity to flow safely and securely. And
for those looking at this as an investment opportunity, what is it you do to reward shareholders? Are you a growth fund, or are you a yield and income fund?
So we're very proud. Since IPO in May 2018, we gave a promise to our investors that we would look at a 4p dividend in our first year and a 7p dividend in our second year. We've made all of those dividend payments, which is a brand new fund listed on the London Stock Exchange. It was obviously very important to us, but also we are very proud of that, and we continue to hold to that promise. So we've been delivering a very regular income to our investors in the form of dividends while increasing the overall portfolio.
How are you standing then for 2021? What are you looking at for this year to improve the situation and bring this further towards the forefront of people's minds as an investment opportunity?
So for us, it's very important to continue to seize the market opportunity. We were the first listed fund focused on energy storage. We were really the market leader. We'll continue to push forward on that, building out our portfolio in our core markets of the UK and Ireland. We will look for an expansion into continental Europe and North America through 2021, all built on the expertise that Gore Street's built up over the last 5 years of understanding the business model around storage, which enables our transition to a low carbon economy while delivering this strong dividend stream to our investors.
Yeah, look, Alex, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks indeed for your time to explain a little bit more about how things look for 2021 in the renewable sector, and indeed for the fund for which you're an investment advisor. That's the Gore Street Energy Storage Fund. Alex Okoneda there joining us. He's Chief Executive of Gore Street Capital. For more videos from us here at IGTV, join us on Twitter at IGTV and subscribe to our YouTube channel.